You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. This week on the Beardcast, we have Bishop Cynthia Harvey, who is the Bishop of the Louisiana Conference of the United Methodist Church. After interviewing Bishop Harvey, we discovered that it would be best to have her interview be a two-part series, so you're listening to one of the parts of the two-part series. We hope you enjoy listening to the Beardcast. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. And today we have a special guest returning with us. We have Bishop Harvey, all the way out from Louisiana, her Episcopal area, and she's coming back on. We had her on a few months ago, and she for whatever reason agreed to come back on and spend some time with us. But Bishop Harvey, we're glad to have you back, and the floor is yours.
Oh, wow. Gosh. Thank you for having me back. You guys were fun to be with. So this is a great way for me to spend my morning anyway. It's a rainy day in Baton Rouge. So that's always kind of interesting for us. But last time we were together, we talked about our flood recovery and where we were. And I think we were in the beginning stages of that work. And now we have throngs and throngs of people coming to Louisiana, which is great. We have, the summer's pretty well booked up. There are actually weeks that, unfortunately we've had to turn some folks away, which I hate to do that, but that has to do with housing and just our ability to manage that number of people. We have 1 week right now scheduled, I think it's the end of June maybe, where we have like 400 youth coming. So it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all of them? But we've got plenty of work. It's just trying to get it staged and having the right people come at the right time for whatever stage that it's in. You don't want electricians to come when there is no electrical work to do, or kids, who can paint and build a wheelchair ramp, or whatever. So we're working on that and trying to coordinate that and trying to get some staffing around this, because as you recall, when August 11th hit, we were still recovering from a March flood earlier in the year. And then we had this, and so we had to build staffing really, really quickly. And then I don't know, this kind of fell off the radar, but just a few months ago, about a month or so ago, we had a tornado in New Orleans. And that's really unusual. A tornado in New Orleans this time of year, it was the end of winter, that's just doesn't happen often. About 600 homes were damaged. So now and we're pretty well stretched right now with the flooding piece. So, how do we address the needs of the people in New Orleans? And working through partners mostly in that regard. And there's something called an Unmet needs table where all of the organizations gather, and this is where the last, the lost, the least. These are the people that, can't get FEMA, they're at the end, unmet needs, basically. And so how do we work with some partner organizations to make sure we get help in those places? But, it just, it stretches our clergy, it stretches our churches, and sometimes in a good way. Churches are doing some great hospitality work. People are like, oh, can we go stay at, that church? Because we heard from somebody else that they were great. So, that's been kind of fun to see people find kind of a new place of ministry through hospitality and receiving some of these teams. And so the work continues. I mean, we're in this for, as I had said before, a long haul. And, it is complicated, and this was so widespread that, you're dealing with all these different parishes, and so all these different government structures. And so I think we're getting past some of those kind of bumps in the road and being able to really focus on the needs of the people. So, that's Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It is the place where we always kind of deal with the unusual, and so this is just one of those times. And we're still waiting, by the way, on. You remember that in the midst of all the flooding, we had the shooting of a young African American man and then 3 police officers, and we're still waiting on the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to make their decision on the Alton Sterling shooting. So we're always kind of holding our breath for when will that be? And it's been a long time. So, in the middle of all of that, we did have this flood that brought people together. And I hope that we remember that when that decision comes, that we remember, oh my gosh, we were better together at that time. So, we're always just waiting and prepared, trying to prepare for whatever might be in front of us. We're busy down here in South Louisiana, and certainly all of Louisiana. It's appointment season, you add that little mix to it all. And, one of the things that I have to remember, I'll make a call to a clergy person this time of the year, asks about something else, and, the phone doesn't stop ringing. They're like, yes, Bishop, because they think, first thing I say is, this is not about an appointment. Because I know that everybody's anxieties are running high. So, so we're, I was telling one of you before we got on that last night I got to spend the evening with these amazing young people. We have several very strong Wesley foundations in the state of Louisiana. But here in Baton Rouge, there's Southern, which is a historic Black university, and LSU. Both have great leaders and a great group of kids. And they did their worship last night together. And my husband and I took dinner. And then I preached the worship service. There were, I'm going to guess close to 100 young people there, which was really pretty exciting. We thought, oh my gosh, we cooked pulled pork for days. This is a lot. You think they'll eat it all? Yeah, they ate it all. So that's what we wanted. We didn't want to have to leave any behind, but it was just great. They have such great questions, and they're really thinking about what's next for them. Those who are discerning a call to ministry. We talked about exploration that's coming up, and the Wesley Foundation person at Southern is on the design team for Explo this time. So, it was really kind of cool that we got to talk about that a little bit. And I got to tell them that that's the most fun I've ever had preaching, is when I got to preach an exploration. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. I would do it again in a minute. It's just, that's where I go get my energy, on days where I'm spent, I just, can't go anymore. You go hang out with 100 of these young people, and it's like, okay, I could do this. You just borrow energy. So, fun time.
And speaking from experience as being a former Wesley director here in New Mexico, anytime a bishop shows up and just shows up to hang out with the kids, it really means a lot. Not only to the person in ministry, but those kids, they're going to remember that, and that authenticity and genuineness of you and your husband just coming and feeding them because that's a big deal in the life of a college student, is food. But just that, I promise they're going to remember that for forever.
And I think what they also need to know is how much that feeds us, in a time where the church and the world are, in chaos, how great it is to be with these just authentic, real young people, trying to decide, oh my gosh, am I going to have a job when I graduate? And this is my junior year. What do I start thinking about now? Those are real questions for these young people. And it's just, it's raw and it's real. So I said, I'd come back. Gosh, I'm sorry. You can probably hear the thunder in the background. I said, I'll come back. And they all kind of went, oh, well, you would. So we're going to, next week, in a couple of weeks for finals, we're just going to take a smorgasbord, a buffet of snacks, just to have there, because kids go there to study. At the Wesley at LSU, there are actually kids that live there. There's 7 young people that actually live on the premises. So, their friends come, and so we're just going to go over and create a snack buffet for them during finals. So it's just fun. So
it's fun.
Hopefully we did a little for them, but they did a whole lot for us. So.
That's wonderful. Going back to the recovery efforts, we'll backtrack a little bit.
That's good.
The thing that you said last time you were on that startled me, I guess, that I didn't really grasp the gravity of was the time frame in which it was going to take y'all to recover. You'd mentioned it was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 years, and that the initial help is absolutely wonderful and it's needed, but it's going to need to go way down the road for several years. And something that I want to remind folks that listen is, if you didn't make it out this summer, look next summer. Look next spring break, look next Christmas break, because it seems like y'all are going to need that recovery help for a while, especially as y'all have been hit hard this year with the floods and now tornadoes, and like you said, the other shootings and things like that. That's a lot to handle in one state.
Yes, and crisis. One of the things I learned when I was at UMCOR is disasters or crises are cumulative. So one just sort of adds to the other, and people will get to a point where it's disaster fatigue. They just it's just a lot they can't handle anymore. So having these teams come in, it's sort of like me going to the Wesley to get energy. When teams come in energized and ready to help, I think it also feeds our people a little bit, gives them that little burst of energy. But we're going to, I'm thinking 3 years minimum here. We're going to work till the money runs out, basically.
Yeah, right.
That's where we are. But it's going to be a long haul, and you're absolutely right. This is, if you didn't make it this time, there'll be plenty of work to do for quite a while. And the gift that these teams are to the community, it's not long before the local Sonic knows who these people are, because they go get an icy after they work, or churches who provide meals. It just gives the churches sort of some hope that there are people out there that know and hear. Because one of the things we learned in this storm is a flood. Now I know why the Weather Channel started to name all kinds of storms, like winter storms, now have names, and because otherwise they don't get any press.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have 6 trillion gallons of water and nobody talks about it. It also happened, we were in the midst of an election, and I always said we got trumped by Trump. So there are a lot of things going on that distracted people. So this at least gives us hope that somebody maybe did listen, did hear the cries of the needy out there. So, yeah, there'll be plenty to do for a while.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Matt.
Bishop, having, I'm born and raised in Oklahoma and have ministered in Oklahoma all my career. I'm very familiar with disaster relief and that whole process. Has there been any talk within your conference about maybe doing some clergy training for spiritual direction or spiritual care during those times? Or I know one of the things that I kind of got involved within when I was serving in Norman was learning about how to be able to better articulate the process to our congregants, because once they understood what the kind of the recovery process looked like, the whole process from disaster to end, we noticed that people were more willing to help long term, because we spend so much time in that first part that we forget to tell them that this is going to be a 3 to 5 year thing. Has there been any talk in your conference about maybe looking at just kind of some training to help train clergy to understand the lingo and to what the process needs to be for when a disaster happens, to better help it? Because I know Louisiana, just like Oklahoma, there's always some kind of storm coming through that causes problems. Have you all thought about maybe implementing some kind of plan for the future for that?
What we've been working on is it almost seems counterintuitive, because we're doing training while we're actually responding to a disaster. We're doing this connecting neighbor to neighbor. That's really a great program of preparing churches and clergy to respond. We've got a lot of trained spiritual directors in our conference. So how do we use them in this response? Because I think you're absolutely right. I think that it's important. I hear a lot of children. It'll be important for our folk to understand that because it is such a long period of time for the response, that dealing with our spiritual health will be really important. So we are doing some of that. And, fortunately and unfortunately, we've had to do that almost simultaneous. So we're responding to this. You're hosting a team. And, oh, by the way, we have a training on Saturday. But amazingly, I was concerned, gosh, will people come? And we've had a lot of great turnout for some of these neighbor to neighbor. We're doing them in the districts. Then, how do you provide spiritual care? How do we provide spiritual care to one another in our churches, for our clergy, for our lay people? That in this particular disaster, we had the pastor was flooded. 85% of the people in the churches were flooded. So it's really hard to respond to your community when you yourself are in need. So how do we do some of that? So we are, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that the spiritual care component, I think it actually becomes even more important as the time passes than it is even at present.
Is that a way that maybe within the connection that we work as pastors and as clergy, when we're sending our youth groups and our young adults and things, that we look at that as leadership and say we can come out and help with the spiritual end of things with the clergy that are present, with the church members? Right.
I think so. And I think even preparing your teams before they leave. In some conferences, there's a really great disaster response structure. Others, there's not. So, what kind of pastoral training, pastoral advice, whatever you might give to your team, it's not, can you just swing a hammer? But, this is what you're going to see. This is what you're going to experience. This is how people might be feeling when you get there. So as clergy out there, to prepare those teams, more than just a prayer before they get on the bus, but to prepare the teams for what they might experience themselves. And not only to what other people, the people that they're helping are experiencing, but to deal with our own feelings. You go to a disaster site and you think, oh my gosh, I'll never forget myself going to, this was pretty dramatic, but going to Japan after the tsunami, nuclear disaster and all. And I remember standing on the shore in this community, and there was nothing. There was nothing. Once in a while you'd find kind of, a broken plate. Sometimes you'd find like an unbroken plate, which is just, blows your mind. And the smell. All I kept saying is, it smells like death here. I didn't know how to deal with my own stuff at that moment. I'm not sure I was prepared to provide pastoral care to anybody else, because I was dealing with my own. It's like I was devastated when I saw what had happened in Oklahoma. You go to a site after a tornado, and you have that same kind of feeling. It's like, and where do you even begin? What do you do? So, I think preparing our teams for what they're going to encounter, what they're going to see, but then what they're going to feel themselves, or you drive back into your driveway at home, into your home, you're like, oh my gosh, I remember crying my very first mission trip, driving back into my driveway and thinking, I didn't realize just how incredibly blessed I am here. I think pastors stuff that can help us prepare teams for dealing with our own emotions during those times. I described that event in Japan, and y'all, I can smell it. In my own mind, it's one of those memories that I just go there in a second.
Yeah, when you said that, it reminded us, or at least reminded me, I don't know about Zach, but it reminded me of the tsunami that we survived when we were at Global Young People's Convocation.
Oh, yeah.
And the experience of that, just kind of like, oh, yeah, I remember that was a crazy year for me, because I experienced, not only where I was living in central Oklahoma at the time, I experienced earthquakes, tornadoes, and then tsunamis. I was kind of like, I'm done. Like I've done it all just in a year.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, that we, when we bring teams in to a site, that we have them pay attention to their spiritual selves too, because far too often we get this mentality, oh, we're gonna kind of the fix it Felix mentality, where we go in, we're gonna fix it, and we don't realize what it really does to us. And I think that's where one of the things I think sometimes gets lost on mission trips is that ministry of presence. And that sometimes the biggest thing you can do for a community or for anybody is just being present. And it may be like, I remember I had a group come in to a tornado site, and their job was just to pick up papers, because the school building had been, the building had been ripped, the top of the roof had been ripped off, and all these papers were just out in the middle of this field. And this person was like, we're just picking up papers. We're not doing anything. Like, no, like, you're picking up papers. This is like a huge thing for this community to have these papers back. And sometimes we want to be like that big gung ho job of, like pushing and pulling it. And we forget how sometimes those small little jobs of pushing paper or helping in an office area that may be a place that is overwhelmed by, needs and stuff is so important. And one of the things that you brought up that kind of stirred up another memory is that those unmet needs tables, those are so important.
The unmet needs table that you were referring to is that place where we find out, these people have exhausted all their resources. And here we are, we can give you $1,000 for, X. But I think that's to me, the best place we can actually be at a time like this.
Yeah, I have to say, the unmet needs table in the last experience that I was at was like kind of almost like a game show. Who's gonna, here's what we have. Who's got funds? And I would leave several meetings where I didn't get to be able to give out any money that I had to bring to the table. And I'd go back, and my senior pastor's like, so how much money did you give away? I was like, I lost today. I wasn't fast enough on raising my hand. And that's a great joy to have. And I know I've said at some unmet needs tables where that's not been the case, where we get creative on how we're going to, build a fence for somebody. And that's always hard. And I think that's where, when we talk about long-term relief, where we kind of bring the stories back. And I think that's so important, of bringing people back to what happened, and here's what's happening, and here's where we are. But yet we still have people that have unmet needs. And I think after watching several and been a part of several unmet needs tables, when it seems like when we come back to the story again, we finally get to a point where we can't actually meet some of those unmet needs. And it's always hard, because there's always going to be another, as soon as you get one disaster kind of at a place, there's always another one.
Yeah.
You've shared a lot of things that have brought you life in your conference, and the things that are going on great. Do you have anything else that you would love to share with us? Because I mean, you've given us some great stories, and I know, like for me, you've provided me with a lot of energy today. And so,
the thing that, and I would just say, and I hate to say that it took a disaster for this. The support that Louisiana has received from across the connection has just been extraordinary. We've raised a lot of money, and it's come from annual conferences. It's come from little churches. It's come from all kinds of places. And, this is when the connection is at its best. We lay aside all our differences and all the things that divide us, and we come together for such a time as this. And to me, that's great hope. When, you read when we read about our own stuff, and then, we get a check for $100,000 from a church or an annual conference. It's like, okay, we're not checking anybody's theology. We're not asking any questions. We're just there to do the work that God has called us to be about. And I think, gosh, can we just not do this all the time? And so it for me, this disaster has given me a lot of maybe more hope for the church and its unity, that we can come together on certain things. I mean, this is something I wouldn't want to lose because of some general conference decision. I wouldn't want to lose the fact that we can come together and help one another. And it just brings me a little more hope. And the fact that we're not asking questions. I have these great images of people saving people after the floods. And I think, gosh, nobody asked any questions about that. Nobody asked, oh, gee, what is your theology about, X? Nobody asked the question. They just try to help their brother or their sister out of the flood water. Didn't matter that one was black and one was white. It didn't matter. They rescued their brother or sister out of the flood water. So I think that to me, that's a great model for who we are called to be as United Methodists, certainly as faithful Christians and followers of Jesus. So it's I know it might seem naive on my part, but why can't we do this every day? Not a flood, please. Not a disaster.
Right.
But, can we just say, this is what it means to help your neighbor. Mm-hmm. I think it's Frederick Buechner that writes about, who's your neighbor. And, the lawyer asks, who's my neighbor? And I think he's expecting, your neighbor is the person that lives, 13 cubic feet from you, and, some legal description of the neighbor. And he doesn't get that. So this is, I think, one of those other examples that, our neighbor is, everybody out there who is in need. So I last night with the Wesley, title of my sermon is "It's All About You," because those young people are told every day that it's not about them. It's not about you. And I wanted them to know it is, in fact, all about you and what your right response is to the gospel. So when it says feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, what are you going to do? This is about you. The only thing you can control in all of this is who you are. So don't let anybody tell you that it's not about you. It is. When it comes to a walking around everyday disciple of Jesus Christ, it is all about you and your right response to the gospel. So, I think about that, and I think about the state of our church and our world and all the name calling and finger pointing and all of that. And I think, it just comes down to love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. Sounds easy,
Bishop,
right?
Oh, go ahead. It does sound easy, but I think that's why Jesus calls us to it, because it's not.
Exactly.
And something that go ahead.
I have a person on our extended cabinet that when we get into some of these very hard conversations, he'll say, "Why don't we just go love Jesus?" It's a really great response, actually. Just go love
That's
Jesus.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Something that I really, really respect about you and your leadership, and try every day to take it as an example in my life. When you and we had a conversation at World Methodist, I don't know if you remember, but it was right at the beginning of all the disaster. And yeah, exactly. And we were trying to get you on and do this live, and your heart just poured out, and I was like, I got to go be with my people. And I follow you on social media and things, not to be creepy, but but I also follow friends with a lot of your clergy and lay people there in Louisiana. And I love watching your picture pop up in the various places that we have mutual connection, whether it's you posting it or somebody else. And oh, by the way, Bishop Harvey's here. And it's with both clergy and lay and members of the church. And when you talk about loving your neighbor and being neighbor, and just loving people, you're not just saying it, you're living it, and you're out in your conference, you're out in your churches, you're getting out there with your people, both on both ends, clergy and the layperson, and that speaks volumes. And to go in it with that type of leadership is huge. It's huge for the church. It's huge for the conference. It's huge for the spiritual needs of the clergy and the members of your church. And so when you talk about loving your neighbor, I think people need to listen to you because you're doing it.
I was with, last couple of days, I had meetings, as I do several times a year with pastors of large churches, pastors of medium-sized churches, and young clergy. And we were talking about, some difficult challenges that we have. And I said, kind of outline our decision-making process. I said, you don't have to agree with me. I love you, you love me. Okay, we're even on that. And you don't have to agree with me. You just have to help me interpret this to people. So I never want folk to think, that means you have to agree and love every decision that we make. That's not the case here in Louisiana. I don't, I can handle the disagreement. I want us actually to have those kind of really valuable, rich conversations. But I also want us to help interpret for one another what it is that we're really trying to do. And, that's just a lot of deep, hard work. And I think we're making some great progress. But I love what we're doing here. I love what I get to do every day. No, I don't love it every day, but I do. I consider it a great privilege to be able to do this right now in this time and place.
Yeah, I feel like you remembered you were in the middle of appointment season.
Yeah,
every day. Oh,
yeah. Oh, well.
It's just it's that time of year when your secretary called me. I was like, oh no. When the phone rings. Well, we appreciate you pouring your heart out and everything that's going on in your life and in the world in Louisiana and within your people. Thank you for that. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you. All right, guys.
Well, very good. Well, for everybody else, we have some wonderful blogs out on our website. If you'll check out beardedtheologians.com, you can find our contributions there. You can also find the back end of the 40 Days of Beardedness, the Lenten devotion that we wrote. And if you haven't started, now's a great time to start and finish that out and take you into Easter. You can also buy shirts and coffee mugs and things like that through our website. Everything that you spend and contribute goes back into the podcast and helps us do this longer and better and so on. Yes, Bishop Harvey has a mug. Yay! But we all, on behalf of the Bearded Theologians and Bishop Harvey, we thank you for listening. I'm Zach Bechtold.
And I'm Matt Franks.
Thanks for checking us out.
All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
See you, Bishop.
Thanks, Bishop. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media, and we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day.